We are going to be discussing the origin of blood cell types and how to ID each one. So I'm going to start with a chart to show that all of the blood cell types begin from stem cells. From stem cells, they break into 3 different categories, and these categories include platelets, red blood cells, and white blood cells. So, stem cells go to platelets, red blood cells, and white blood cells. So then from there, our white blood cells break into 3 different subcategories. And these include lymphocytes, monocytes, and granulocytes. So, we start from stem cells. They break into 3 categories: platelets, red blood cells, white blood cells. Then our white blood cells break into 3 subcategories, which are lymphocytes, monocytes, and granulocytes. And later on, when we start discussing each separately, I'll get to that granulocytes also break into 3 other subcategories, but we'll get to that. So we're going to start with platelets. So we're going to start discussing platelets. So platelets are very small, as you can see. They're in between these on the outside of red blood cells. So they fit in between the red blood cells. They are very small. They have no nucleus. And they also, most people will refer to them as like spots or dirt because they're so tiny compared to our other blood cell types. The job of a platelet is that they fit in between the vessels and they plug holes, and this is to stop from bleeding. So they plug holes in the vessels to stop it from bleeding. So that's the point. So as we said, they fit in between the red blood cells. So, and you can see the red blood cells in this picture, but this is just the red blood cells without the platelets in the middle of them. So now we're going to move on to our red blood cells, and the red blood cells are the most abundant blood cell in our entire body. They obviously are in the blood, and they transport oxygen. Their main job is to transport oxygen. They have no nucleus, and the reason for having no nucleus is so they have more room to store more hemoglobin, more space to store it, and the more hemoglobin they can store, the more oxygen they can transport through the body. An example of this, a real world example would be anemia. People that are anemic, if you see them, oftentimes they're very pale, and this is because they have a hemoglobin deficiency, and hemoglobin it gives the blood the red color. So they're paler because they don't have as much hemoglobin. Also, they tire very easily or have shortness of breath, and that is due to the fact that they have a hemoglobin deficiency, and so not as much oxygen is being transported. So those are our red blood cells. So now, as I stated on here, we're going to move into our white blood cell category, which is the most important for the immune system. And as I said, it breaks into 3 categories, and that's lymphocytes, monocytes, and granulocytes. So we're going to start by talking about the lymphocytes. So our lymphocytes, here they are. As we see, they're larger. They have a very big, uniform, solid nucleus. As you can tell, you can barely see any space. They're very round, very uniform nucleus, and that's how we identify these lymphocytes. Now, these lymphocytes, as I said earlier, they have a very round, uniform nucleus, but they also have a very small amount of cytoplasm surrounding it, as you can tell. So you barely see any here. I don't even see any on this one. So they barely have cytoplasm surrounding their uniform nucleus. That's another reason we can identify them. These are involved in specific immune responses, and these specific immune responses do include antigen to antibody reactions. So that is what our lymphocytes do. So now we're going to move on to our monocytes. Okay, so our monocytes, you can see that, if I can make that. Okay, there we go. So they are very similar to our lymphocytes, besides the fact that, as you can tell, they're not round. If you see that little indentation right there, they're not round, they're kidney shaped. They have a very kidney shaped nucleus, which is one way that we can ID them. Also, they are the largest white blood cell. So as you can tell, compared to the lymphocytes, they are a lot larger. So these monocytes, they are very slow to get to a infection. Now, they're very slow to get to the infection, but once they get there, they arise in big numbers. And their job is that they will enlarge. These monocytes will enlarge, and they'll differentiate into macrophages, and these macrophages will go around and they'll get the debris that's left from the infection. So that's what our monocytes do. So now we will move into our granulocytes. So our granulocytes, as I said, are broken into 3 subcategories. And I don't know where my eraser is. So our granulocytes are broken into 3 subcategories. And we call them granulocytes because their cytoplasm, unlike the lymphocytes and monocytes, they're filled with granules. So hence the name granulocytes. And it's broken into 3 other subcategories. And these subcategories are basophils, eosinophils, so we have basophils, eosinophils, and neutrophils. So granulocytes, basophils, eosinophils, neutrophils. So we'll start with, I believe we're going to start with neutrophils. So yes, okay. So neutrophils are multiple lobed nucleuses. As you can tell from the picture, you see the multiple lobes in it. And they're very oblong, so they're not rounded lobes either, which we will see when we discuss the next one. These neutrophils respond rapidly to chemotaxis, to bacterial damage. Once they respond, they release lysozymes and strong oxidants, and these help fight the infections. So that's what our neutrophils do. So now we're going to move on to our eosinophils, and as we see, they're multiple lobe too. I think the number was 3 lobes, but if you look, they're very rounded. So in our neutrophils, they were oblong, as I stated earlier, but these are very rounded, and that's how we identify them. We also identify them because they're a lighter color. They're like a red-orange, and our other ones are dark. As you see, they're very dark. So that's how we identify these eosinophils. So these eosinophils, they combat histamine in allergic responses, and actually 2 of these will be involved with allergic responses because our basophils will as well. So we'll move to our basophils, and there's a big difference when identifying basophils. As you can tell, they are very, very dark. They're very dark, black, blue, however you want to say it. They're darker than everything, and that is how we identify them. So these basophils, they enter tissue fluids, and there they release heparin, and they release histamine, and they release serotonin. And they release these in response to allergic reactions. So as I said, basophils and eosinophils both have to do with allergic reactions. So these basophils release heparin, and they release histamine, and they release serotonin in response to an allergic reaction. So these are our 3 types of granulocytes. And these, as I stated before, these lymphocytes, monocytes, and granulocytes are part of our white blood cells. And our white blood cells, they circulate the body. And when they circulate the body, they'll keep circulating the body until they receive a signal that the body is damaged. And when they receive the signal that the body is damaged, they will leave the blood vessel by squeezing through a vessel wall, and then they will move to the source of the signal, and then that's how they begin to heal. And then I told you how each kind of white blood cell begins to heal. And that's the end of my